Give me this month's wages!" The shout tore across the dusty yard, sharp and unforgiving, loud enough to make the horses shift and stamp their hooves. A drunk man swayed near the porch, shirt hanging loose, face flushed, breath thick with cheap liquor. His finger jabbed toward the young woman standing behind him. She lowered her head and clasped her hands behind her back, her shoulders trembling in a way that suggested this was not the first time. "You think you can keep my money from me?" he snarled, his voice rough with anger and drink. She said nothing. She did not argue or plead, only shook her head slightly. A shadow moved forward. A bare-chested man with a powerful build stepped ahead and placed himself between them, closing the distance to just a few paces. He did not tense or raise his fists. He simply stood there like a wall. His eyes were steady and cold, leaving no room for bargaining. "This is my land," he said, his voice low, slow, and unmistakably clear. The drunk man hesitated, as if realizing for the first time that he no longer held the upper hand. "And she works for me." The woman behind him held her breath. "If you don't want trouble," the ranch owner continued after a brief pause, "then leave my land. Now." There was no shouting and no threat in his tone, only a boundary drawn firmly in the dirt. The drunk man scoffed, muttered curses under his breath, then turned away and staggered toward the dirt road. The woman remained still, her head lowered further as tears fell onto the hard ground. The ranch owner stayed where he was until the man disappeared from view. Then he spoke again, his voice lower and slower this time. "You don't need to go back there tonight." She looked up, stunned, as if she had just heard something that had never existed in her world before. He asked no questions and offered no explanations, turning instead toward the porch and walking away. She stood there for a moment, then quietly followed. The late afternoon light stretched across the empty yard, and for the first time in many years, she walked forward without looking back. Before that afternoon, she had always come and gone without drawing attention. She arrived early, finished her work, and left along the same dirt road every evening. To most people on the ranch, she was simply the woman who cooked the meals, cleaned the house, and washed the clothes. Dependable, quiet, easy to overlook. But the ranch had changed since she started working there. Meals were steady and filling, without excess. The men stopped complaining about shortages. The pantry stayed organized, never full, never empty. Supplies lasted longer than they used to, even though no one felt deprived. It was not obvious enough to praise, but it was noticeable enough to feel. The ranch owner noticed it first, though he did not mention it. He was not a man who talked unless there was a reason to. He only saw that the place ran smoother now, as if small problems were being handled before they had time to grow. She never claimed credit. She asked before making changes and kept her voice low. When she bought supplies, she waited for the right time and the right price. When she cooked, she planned meals around what was already on hand. Leftover meat became the next day's stew. Bones became broth. Nothing was wasted unless it had to be. To her, this was not skill. It was habit. She had learned it long before the ranch, in a house where money disappeared as quickly as it came. Living with a gambling father had taught her that carelessness always ended the same way. If she did not count every coin, there would be nothing left when it mattered. So she counted. She planned. She held back when others would have spent. After the confrontation with her father, she no longer returned to that house. She stayed on the ranch instead, sleeping in a small room near the kitchen. With nowhere else to hurry back to, her days slowed, and her work stretched more naturally into the rest of the place. She shared meals with the others and stayed long enough to notice small issues before they became real problems. That was when the ranch owner began to see her differently, not as someone in need of protection, and not as a burden, but as someone who paid attention. Someone who understood that keeping a place alive was not about big decisions, but about many small ones done right, day after day. One evening, she spoke of it simply, without pride. She said she had learned to be careful because she had no choice. Waste had always turned into hunger. He listened and said only, "I figured." And that was enough. The ranch manager had been there longer than anyone could remember. His back was bent, his hair thin and gray, and his hands shook slightly when he wrote at the end of the day. He knew every fence post and ledger line, but the work was beginning to wear him down. One morning, he told the ranch owner he would not last another season. There was no argument. The owner only nodded, as if he had already seen this coming. That afternoon, he called her aside. He did not praise her or soften his words. He told her the manager needed someone to follow him, someone to watch how things were recorded and settled, how money moved through the ranch without disappearing. He told her she would keep her work in the house, but outside those hours, she would learn the rest. She hesitated immediately. She said she had never handled real accounts before, never dealt with men who expected answers. She said she was afraid of making mistakes. He listened and ended the conversation with a single sentence. No one knows before they begin. So she began. At first, she only watched. She stood beside the manager as he checked receipts, marked wages, and counted supplies. She listened more than she spoke, asking questions only when she was certain they mattered. Her notes were small and careful, written in the margins of scrap paper she kept folded in her apron. She made mistakes. She miscounted once and caught it before the day ended. She forgot a small expense and corrected it the next morning. Each error stayed with her, not as shame, but as a lesson she did not repeat. The manager noticed. He began to let her handle small things on her own, buying supplies for the week, balancing food costs against wages, comparing what was spent with what was used. She approached it the same way she always had, cautiously and without waste. By the end of the month, the numbers held steady. Nothing was missing. Nothing overflowed. One evening, the manager looked at her ledger and nodded. "You keep money better than most men I've worked under," he said. She said nothing, but the weight of the work felt different after that, heavier and more real. And the ranch owner was watching. As her role quietly expanded on the ranch, whispers began to spread beyond it. The first rumor came from town, carried by men who did not know the work but noticed the change. They said the ranch was running too smoothly. They said the owner favored her. They said a woman did not stay that close to a man's land without reason. Then her father added his own poison. He told anyone who would listen that his daughter had been lured away, that she had been kept from her family, that the ranch owner had taken advantage of her need. Each word was meant to shame her and stain the man who had given her work. She heard the talk before she saw it. Faces in town lingered longer. Conversations stopped when she passed. One afternoon, she told the ranch owner she should leave before things grew worse. He looked at her once and shook his head. The next time the rumors surfaced openly, he answered them himself. A man laughed in town and said the ranch owner had stolen a woman from her own blood. The owner turned slowly, his voice even and unraised. "She works for me," he said, "and she does her work well. Watch your mouth." There was no argument after that. Back at the ranch, she kept working, though the weight of the talk followed her into the evenings. She wondered if staying was selfish, if her presence caused more harm than good. She did not speak these thoughts aloud. One night, as they sat after supper, she finally told him why she had always been careful with money. She spoke of her father's gambling, of how nothing stayed where it was put, of how waste always turned into hunger. She said she learned to plan because she had no choice. He listened without interrupting. "I figured," he said. The words settled something inside her. He had not trusted her blindly. He had seen her first. And somewhere beyond the ranch fence, trouble was already moving closer, carrying debts that would soon come knocking. The trouble reached the ranch on a quiet morning. Two men came down the dirt road just after sunrise, their horses slow and deliberate, as if they knew they would not be turned away. They did not ask for her. They asked for her father. And by the time the message reached her, she already knew what it meant. Her father's small place was done. The gambling had finally caught up, and the debts were no longer patient. The land, the house, everything he had left was about to be taken. He came to the ranch that evening, sober enough to understand his situation and desperate enough to beg. His voice was smaller now, stripped of its old authority. He asked her to help him, said he had nowhere else to go, said he would die if she turned her back. She listened without interrupting. She knew exactly how much money she had. She had counted it many times. It was not enough. It would never be enough to satisfy men who only understood numbers, not mercy. Still, the choice hurt. He was her father, the same man who had ruined their home, the same man whose habits had killed her mother slowly, day by day. The anger was still there, heavy and unresolved, but it did not erase the bond completely. That night, she did not sleep. The ranch owner saw it in the way she worked the next morning, precise but distant, as if her thoughts were somewhere else. He did not press her. He only waited until she spoke on her own. When she finally told him, she did not ask for help. She only said the truth, that she could not save her father, no matter how carefully she counted. He said nothing at first. Then he told her to leave it with him. She protested once, quietly, saying she could not let him take on her family's burden. He stopped her with a raised hand, not unkindly, but firmly. "I know what I'm doing," he said. She nodded, though her chest felt tight. For the first time, she understood that help did not always look like rescue. Sometimes it looked like a decision made calmly, without drama, by someone who saw the whole picture. And somewhere beyond the hills, papers were already being prepared. The deal was settled quickly. The ranch owner bought the land before the creditors could strip it bare. There was no celebration and no relief in his voice when the papers were signed. It was business, plain and direct, the kind that left no room for misunderstanding. Her father stood on the edge of the property when it was done, smaller than she had ever seen him. He thanked the ranch owner repeatedly, his words tumbling over each other, heavy with shame and fear. The ranch owner let him finish. Then he spoke. "You should thank your daughter," he said. "I did this for her." The old man froze. "She's helped this ranch more than you know," the owner continued, his tone steady. And from now on, you'll manage on your own." He laid out the terms without raising his voice. No drinking. Honest work to repay what could be repaid. A chance to buy the land back someday, if he proved he could hold it. Nothing more. "And she stays here," he added. "She works for me." The words landed heavily. Her father looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time not as something owed to him, but as someone standing on her own ground. He nodded once, unable to argue. Life on the ranch returned to its rhythm, but something had shifted. The older manager stepped back further, trusting her with full days instead of hours. She handled wages, supplies, and accounts with a steadiness that surprised even herself. The numbers no longer frightened her. They made sense. They obeyed logic, not emotion. The ranch owner watched as the place continued to hold together under her care. He said little, but when problems arose, he looked to her first. By the time the season turned, the transition was complete. She was no longer just helping the ranch survive. She was helping it grow. And as the evenings grew cooler, a quiet understanding settled between her and the man who had given her work, trust, and a place that no longer felt temporary. After the matter with her father was settled, the ranch fell into a quieter rhythm, the kind that did not demand attention but held together through routine and trust. There were no more sudden visits, no more raised voices at the edge of the property. Whatever storms had followed her before seemed to stop at the fence. Work filled her days, steady and predictable. She no longer moved through the ranch as someone borrowing space. She moved as someone responsible for it. The older manager stepped back almost entirely now, staying close enough to answer questions, but far enough to let her make decisions on her own. He watched more than he spoke, and when he did speak, it was usually to confirm what she already knew. She kept the same habits that had brought her this far. She counted carefully and planned ahead. She questioned costs that did not make sense and adjusted those that did. Wages were paid on time, not a day early and not a day late. Supplies arrived when they were needed, not before and not too late. The ranch did not grow lavish or wasteful, but it grew solid, and solidity was something people trusted. The men noticed the difference. They came to her with questions before problems grew large, not because they were told to, but because answers came faster that way. She never raised her voice and never acted above them. She listened, decided, and moved on. The work spoke for itself. The ranch owner watched all of it without hovering. He did not interfere or correct her in front of others. When an issue arose, he asked for her thoughts and listened. Sometimes he agreed with her approach. Sometimes he chose another path. But the conversation itself mattered. It told her she was no longer working in the dark. One evening, after they finished reviewing the week's accounts, he studied the numbers for a long moment. Then he closed the ledger and nodded once. "It holds," he said. It was not praise. It was trust. The words stayed with her longer than any compliment ever had. For the first time in her life, the future did not feel like a threat waiting to arrive. It felt like something she could prepare for, something she could manage. In the quieter moments, she found herself noticing him in ways she had not allowed before. The way he stepped aside to let others speak. The way he fixed things without complaint or credit. The way he never asked for gratitude, as if doing the right thing was simply part of the work. She did not name the feeling growing in her chest. She only knew that the ranch no longer felt temporary. It felt like a place she belonged. The night was calm and clear. They sat side by side on the porch, cups of coffee warming their hands, the moon hanging low and pale above the open land. No ledgers lay between them. No work waited to be discussed. The ranch slept quietly around them, steady and whole, as if it trusted the people who watched over it. She looked out across the yard and thought about the man beside her. To others, he appeared distant and unyielding, a man shaped by labor and long days, but she had seen what lived beneath that surface. She had seen how carefully he chose his words, how he protected without possession, how he set boundaries without cruelty. Around him, she did not feel the need to explain herself or stay on guard. Being near him did not make her feel small. It made her feel steady. He watched her in the moonlight, noticing the ease in her posture, the quiet confidence that had replaced the tension she once carried. He had seen her arrive as someone careful and withdrawn, and he had watched her grow into someone who held responsibility without fear. Beneath her gentle manner was a strength that did not demand recognition, a kind of strength that endured. He noticed her smile then, simple and unguarded, and thought how rare it was to see something so honest. It was not the smile of someone trying to please. It was the smile of someone at ease. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The quiet did not press on them. It rested easily, like the night itself. Finally, he broke the silence. "This house has felt warmer since you stayed," he said, his voice low and even. "I hope it stays warm like this." She turned toward him, surprised not by the words, but by how naturally they fit into the moment. She smiled softly, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "And I hope I can keep managing the ranch well," she said. He nodded once, accepting the answer as it was, without pushing it further. The moon climbed higher, and the night held them in its stillness. Nothing more needed to be said. The work would continue in the morning, and so would whatever had begun between them, unspoken but understood. Behind them, the porch light burned steadily. Inside, the house remained warm. If this story stayed with you, even after it ended, please take a moment to like the video. It helps these quiet stories find the people who need them. And if you'd like to follow more journeys like this one, stories about strength, dignity, and second chances, you're welcome to subscribe. Thank you for sitting with this story until the end.